This is the Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Luke. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their town homes to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace among those whom he favors." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told them. This is the gospel of our Lord.
So this is a big night. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share it with you. One of the great gifts of our liturgical year, we do follow a lectionary that has a 3-year cycle. Year A focusing primarily on the Gospel of Matthew, which we just finished. We're entering into year B, which will focus on the Gospel of Mark. Year C, of course, will be the Gospel of Luke. But it's always been a great blessing to me that we have this, annual cycle that brings us throughout the life of Christ. And it begins really in a season of Advent, a time of expectation, preparation. We await the coming, not only the birth of Jesus, the human being, but the birth of the Christ, and also the second coming when Christ will return. And we come this evening to the birth of the Christ child, the story as it's told in Luke of, the couple arriving in Bethlehem, having to go to a stable. There was no room no accommodation in the inn, and the child delivered in a stable, being wrapped, and angels speaking to shepherds and so forth. And, we go from here to the baptism, the temptation narratives, Jesus's first encounters to the group in Nazareth and his hometown, and the miracles and teaching stories that we'll get all throughout the year. The great feast of the Transfiguration goes on and on, culminating, of course, in the great story of the Passion, the Last Supper, the anguish in the garden, the trials with the high priests and Pilate, and finally the crucifixion, and culminating all with the resurrection and the resurrection appearances. But not that any of these events are more important than another. They're all different facets of, one exquisite gem. But uniquely this morning, we are focused on the birth of Christ. And of course, this has little to do with what happened historically over 2,000 years ago, the human being, Jesus, being brought to life through the vehicle of his mother Mary. It has more to do with the birth of Christ in us. And so it's an important self-revelation of God, of who we really are. In the infinite generosity of our Creator, love has been poured out into human vessels, which is humanity. We are that manifestation. But the problem is that we forget who we are. And we walk around not conscious of our true identity. Often we are who we think we are, which is a big mistake. Or we are who we think other people think we ought to be, or what our culture expects us to be, or what other people expect us to be. And so we walk around in a state really that can be best described as being exiled. We're exiled from our true selves. We don't really remember who we are or why we're here, how loved we are, and how our purpose in our brief journey from cradle to grave is to share this love as generously as we are able, and to receive it as well. I've always been intrigued. I'm not sure when exactly my devotion to Mary came into my life. I imagine it was about 20 years ago, but obviously I am smitten by her and her love for me, and the maternal nature of God, the divine feminine, the source of unconditional love and comfort. But for many years now, one of my spiritual practices has been the recitation of the Rosary. Many of you are familiar with the Rosary. And the Rosary ends up with what in Christianity, and especially monastic Christianity, is a very important prayer called the Salve Regina. It's Latin for Hail, Holy Queen. And it's a prayer that I initially was perplexed by, because it goes something like this. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy. Again, the merciful aspect of God, Mother of Mercy. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. Our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry. Now, right there, I'm not exactly sure. To thee do we cry. And then it takes an even darker turn by saying, to thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. So, just consider for a moment where that puts humanity on a spectrum. Banished children of Eve. We have been excluded or sent out from the garden. We are away from who we really are. And although, I initially took, deference to original sin, it's not I think we're originally blessed. Sin happens to us after the fact, but, the original offering is a blessing. But we find ourselves in a condition of being banished. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Now, again, this puts the human condition mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Mourning and weeping in this valley. Again, a state of almost impoverished banishment. We are away from who and where and what we would really like or are meant to be. And so the condition of the Salve Regina puts us in a very perilous circumstance. Poor banished children of Eve, turn thine eyes of mercy towards us. And after this, our exile, in other words, after our exile, after our time on the planet, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. So it's as though, at the end of this particular pilgrimage, then we get to see who Jesus is. And although I do take issue with the relationship now between a fallen humanity and the Mother of God, I can see the truth in it. I can see the truth in it, especially in the human condition that it exists right now, because what happens to us in exile and having forgotten who we really are is that we begin to act out. We begin to act in ways that cause damage to ourselves. We think less of ourselves because we don't really understand how loved we are and how loving we are intended to be. And not only that, not only are we a danger to ourselves, but then, my goodness, we're a danger to those that we care about and those that love us. We're a danger to our families. And, beyond the danger that we are to ourselves and to our families, we're a danger to the world in which we live. And we've created a society that's dangerous to itself. The world is a toxic situation, and it didn't take a pandemic for us to know that we're in a state of exile. We have banished ourselves. This is a prison of our own making. This is a wilderness of our own design. So here we are, exiled, acting out, behaving in ways we were never intended to be behaved. So what's going to happen? What's the situation? We're in a dilemma. We're in a dilemma. And the whole point of the biblical narrative is to remind us who we really are. Offspring of a generous and loving God who has poured out love and infinity into our hearts in this Christ child. The prayer that we offer every Sunday, "O Christ, you are within each of us," and it's in there. And even as I say that, you know that it's true. You know that there's a better part in you that wants birthing all the time. You've seen it even in the most minute acts of kindness and compassion toward others and those that you've seen toward yourself. And I think one of the great indicators of this compassion and its existence is in the people that we know and love that have been patient with us and loved us. We know that it's in them, and it could be within us too. I think one of the most direct ways that we can come home to ourselves is to see that in other people, to notice the compassion of Christ being showered out upon us. It brings out the best in us. That's what love does. The purpose of love is to bring out the best in the other, and that's what love does. And I think Christmas is a perfect time for that. I don't think it's surprising at all that people find Christmas a time to give one another gifts. To extend some compassion, to be uniquely grateful and expressive of that gratitude toward other people. And so Christmas has become, and as it rightly should become, a magical time. And it's not hard for me to go back to my childhood. And I was a happy kid. We had a lovely home. My parents loved each other. There were 3 of us kids. We never wanted for anything. Christmas was always plenty of gifts. But I remember, in our family, we never saw a gift up until after the pageant on Christmas Eve when we went to bed, knowing that when we woke up the next morning, the living room would be transformed into a magical landscape. The tree was there, all lit up, piles of presents for every individual. I mean, it was just magical. And for a little kid, it was unbelievable. But the thing that I remember most about Christmas, and I'll share this because it's been a profound lesson in my life. We did have plenty. I grew up with plenty. And when we came down on Christmas morning, we each had our little location where our gifts were. 2 years on either side of me, you can imagine 7, 8, 9, 10, all those years around in there. And we walk into this, wonderland. And, the rules, here's how it went. My mother sat in her chair with a yellow legal pad. And only one person at a time could open a gift. And everyone would admire what they had. And my mother had a list, here's what Dad got, here's what Mom got, Marty, Bill, Laura, all the kids had their list of what they got and who gave it to them. So by the time the gifts were open, and it took a while, we enjoyed all that. And then at the end of that, we'd all go into the kitchen and sit at the kitchen table. My mother would cook an enormous breakfast, which was great. And while we were cooking breakfast, before anybody ate anything, you had to write a thank you note to the people who had given you gifts and acknowledge what they had given you and how much you enjoyed it. That happened every Christmas. We got our little list, and when we were really little, Mom would have little cards made up for us. Thank you for the blank, and I really enjoyed the blank, and so forth, and who it was from, and all that. But it became, and I can't tell you in all those years what I got for Christmas. I can't tell you what I got, but I can tell you who gave it to me and how grateful I was for it.
Wow.
And it's interesting to me how central to the experience of the birth of Christ gratitude is. How central to Christmas gratitude is. And it comes to me as no surprise that the defining experience of certainly liturgical Christians, Sunday after Sunday, is exactly what we're doing tonight, which is called the Holy Eucharist. The Holy Eucharist. And the Eucharist is a Greek word, and it means great thanksgiving. And I'm not just talking about, oh, hey, thanks a lot. I'm talking about down on your knees from the depths of your heart. Thank you. For what? The gift of life. As much as you'd like to buy it, as much as you'd like to purchase it, as much as you'd like to give it to yourself, you cannot give yourself a single breath. You cannot give yourself life. Your parents didn't give you life. They provided the biological elements that provided for it, but life is given. Life is gift, and so is everything. All of life, everything is gift. And the only appropriate response to any gift is always gratitude. You know yourself that when you've done all the shopping, thought about the person, knew exactly what they wanted, knew what they loved, spent a little bit more than you should have, you can't wait for that moment when they open it up and see it, just so you can see the delight on your face, because that warms your heart. That touches a part that's holy and sacred inside of you, because it's touched a part that's holy and sacred inside of them. And so the purpose then, one of the great gifts of Christmas is the fondness of the memories and the magic of the moment, and to relive it and bring it back and make it new and have it cycled through every year again and again and again and again. It's one of the ways that we awaken to who we really are, and not to let this reminder pass us by. And the other great thing, the other great reminder of who we are and how we can come home is prayer, the purpose of prayer. Again, to ground us and to remind us and to return us to the people that we are and the people that God has created us to be. And so I ran through a very brief exercise a few nights ago with our mission committee. And I want to run this by you as well this evening, just by way of entering into a more contemplative Christmas Eve. But this is the practice of Lectio Divina. Many of you have heard of this. And I'm just going to walk you through it very briefly. It won't take much time. And I hope that you find some nourishment from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select just a very brief portion of the gospel that Susan read so beautifully this evening. This, again, is from Luke's infancy narrative. And before I launch into this, I just want to say one thing about the baby being wrapped in swaddling clothes and placed in a manger. He was born in a stable, but he was wrapped and placed in a manger. And the manger is actually a food trough. This is where the animals go to eat their food. And Bethlehem, it should be a note, Bethlehem is a combination of two words, Beth, which means city of, and Lechem, which means bread, the city of bread. And how interesting that Jesus would be born in the city of bread, be wrapped in swaddling clothes and laid in a manger, and he would become food for humanity for the remainder of the eons, the bread of life from the city of bread. So again, a brief passage from the gospel this morning, and I'll read it. And I just want you to listen to it for what will be the second time this evening. So the shepherds went with haste, and they found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in the manger. And when they had seen, they understood what had been told them concerning this child. And all who heard marveled at the things told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept in mind all these things, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, even as it was spoken to them. So now I'm going to read the passage a second time. And this time I want you to be attentive to a word or a phrase or a concept that seems to be coming forth from the scriptures through the Spirit just for you and just for tonight on this Christmas Eve. Again, what message may be coming to you from this particular passage on this Christmas Eve? So they went with haste, and they found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in the manger. And when they had seen, they understood what had been told them concerning this child. And all who heard marveled at the things told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept in mind all these things, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, even as it was spoken to them. Take just a moment now in prayer to ask what this particular passage is speaking to you. And finally, I will read the passage a third time. And after reading it the third time, I would just like you to sit and contemplate the experience of hearing and reflecting and praying and attentive to whatever movement of the Spirit might happen in your heart on this Christmas Eve. And so they went with haste, and they found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen, they understood what had been told them concerning this child. And all who heard marveled at the things told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept in mind all these things, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, even as it were spoken to them. You know, it seems so easy to me to over sentimentalize the birth narrative in Luke's gospel or in Matthew's gospel. You know, how we have this, adorable couple going to Bethlehem, having this child. And we pass over how difficult and life-threatening circumstance this really was. I have not been pregnant for 9 months, but I can imagine that a 35-mile trek, possibly riding an animal, coming near term with a child would not have been that easy. That was enforced by the empire, a census for the purpose of taxation. And to arrive then at a city that was already overflowing with people, bustling activity, no room at the inn, no welcome, no help. And my sense is that the circumstances of childbearing in those days were life-threatening. Probably the most dangerous thing that a woman could do was to have a child. So it would be natural that it would be attended by people who had that experience before and knew what they were doing. And this particular couple had no such support. In a stable, who knows what the lighting was, but one can only imagine how difficult a circumstance, how dangerous a situation they were really in. And there is no room at the inn. There is no room in life in the inn. It's all just too busy for us to reflect on what's really important. We can get carried away until we go to a quiet place. And then all alone, God reminds us that no matter how difficult things may look, no matter how far away or how distant the exile might have taken us, God's presence is still there, and we are still welcome home. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Contributions to St. Luke's Episcopal Church from patrons like you help to make the digital ministry and other outreach within the community possible. If it is in your heart to make a donation, St. Luke's secure PayPal link, as well as the church's mailing information, may be found in the description of this video. Thank you.